G'day, this is Matt, and I want to say welcome again to the Apprenticeship Toolbox. This is our third episode, and the idea is just once a week to give you something that may be helpful on your journey of faith. Usually it'll be something that's been pretty significant in my own journey, and that's no exception today. I'm actually talking to you from our little prayer room here at Citywide Baptist Church. I'm not showing you around the room because this room is going to be completely renovated in the next 6 months, because we want to create space for people to just be able to come and reflect, and we'll have a room specifically set aside for that. And that leads in nicely to what I'll be talking about today. You see, I've got this book. It looks a little raggedy. I bought this book new, and this book has had a profound shaping you would certainly call it a profound shaping influence on my whole life. I first came across this book at the age of 20 as I went and did Bible college, and initially it was the first section of the book that stuck out. Later on it was the second section, and then finally the third section. So I'll tell you a little bit about this book. It is a book by a man by the name of Henri Nouwen, and I don't know where you're up to on the journey, how much reading you've done, but Henri Nouwen is a former Catholic, or was a Catholic priest who went on a journey of being quite a well-respected academic, and then met another guy by the name of Jean Vanier, who had set up these communities for the disabled, these LARSH communities, and we've actually got one of those here in Hobart. And Henri Nouwen left his quite prestigious academic post as a biblical scholar and teacher, and moved into one of these communities and wrote about his experience, and some of his writings have had a huge impact on Christians all around the world, and certainly this book has been profound for me. The book is called Reaching Out. I've got a couple of copies which tells you a bit about how significant it is for me, and I've given away lots of copies of this book. And why I'm wanting to recommend it as part of the Apprenticeship Toolbox is I think he, in a particular way, manages to capture what the journey of faith is actually about. I talked about 3 sections of the book, and the book is divided into 3 broad sections. And I think in many ways he's captured the 3, what he calls the 3 movements of the spiritual life. Now, the first movement he calls the movement from hostility. No, actually, that's the second movement. I'll get it right. The movement from loneliness to solitude. The first movement, he says, of the spiritual life is the movement from loneliness to solitude. The reason this book was so profound for me is, as I came to Bible college at the age of 20, I hadn't realised what this deep pain I was feeling was, until I read this book and started, I'm profoundly lonely. And I was looking to fill that loneliness with all kinds of other things, and to keep distracted and listening to music. I was trying to avoid the loneliness. And what Henri Nouwen says is this whole section is about what does it mean to face the loneliness that all of us experience. And he actually says this, that the movement from loneliness to solitude is the beginning of any spiritual life. He's kind of saying you can't have a spiritual life until you face your loneliness. And that was a profound journey for me. And I read the rest of the book, but I really didn't get the rest of the book for the first 10 years of engaging with this book. That tells you how profound it really is. But it's one of those books that you'll read a sentence and go away thinking, I've got to think about that for the next 3 weeks. It's a pretty profound little book. But that journey was a journey that really honestly took me 10 years. The journey to learn to face my loneliness and get to a point where I started to enjoy solitude. And I think he's right. I think it is the very first step on the journey of faith, the journey from loneliness to solitude. But then he talks about the next phase, and he talks about the journey from hostility to hospitality. And he says, look, you really can't be talking about hospitality till you face the loneliness of solitude journey. But once you've faced that, then you can start to welcome people into your life and into your heart. And he says that there are two sides to hospitality. And again, this stuff was so important for me. One is what he calls receptivity, which is where you create space in your day and in your heart for other people. But he also says there needs to be this other side to it, and he calls it confrontation, where people actually get to meet you. There's a discipline in learning to create space for people and being hospitable that way. But also he says you can't really have a relationship between a somebody and a nobody. And you need to learn to be you and let people sort of bump up against you and get to know who you actually are. That was a revolutionary thought for me. And for me, it was that this whole section of the book became the theme of the next 10 years of my life in many ways. And to be honest, I'm still now in the third phase of this book. And I don't know how it'll work for you. It may be that you just get it all straight away. The third phase of this book, though, is one that is now confronting and challenging me. And he talks about the movement from illusion to prayer. That many of us have these fantasies and pictures of who God is, but we've got to take this journey to actually get to know and have a relationship with God. And he says that the paradox of prayer is that we all have to learn how to pray, while at the same time, prayer can only be experienced as a gift. Both of those things are true. And he calls that the paradox of prayer. And honestly, in my spiritual life at the moment, I'm still learning how to pray. And I'm still in this third phase of the book. So I'm not saying this is a book that I am no longer challenged by. I'm still very challenged by this book, Reaching Out by Henri Nouwen. And it has been a profound tool for me in shaping how I think about my own journey, how I think about myself. And it's really confronted me in lots of different ways. So you'll see as you flick through here, lots of underlining and highlighting. And it is the kind of book that I would give away on a regular basis to people who are wanting to take their faith journey seriously. Mind you, if you're wanting to just stay superficial, if you're wanting to stay safe, don't read it. It's not the kind of book you can read safely. But if you're really ready to step up and say, okay, Jesus, I want to take my journey with you seriously, I couldn't recommend more highly the book Reaching Out. It is, as I've said, it would have been one of the most shaping books for me. And I hope it's a book that, in our church family at least, is one that lots of people get into gradually as we all take this journey of what does it mean to actually live the journey of faith. And those three, what he calls the three movements of the spiritual life, from loneliness to solitude, from hostility to hospitality, and from illusion to prayer. So there you go, that's this week's toolbox. I hope you find this book, if you get a chance to get into it, helpful. And next week we'll have something else for you.